The room went silent the moment the lawyer said the words, his only granddaughter. It was the kind of silence that doesn't just fall, it drops heavy and undeniable like something breaking in midair. I felt dozens of eyes shift toward me, sharp as laser sights. I was standing near the back of the conference room, still in my Marine Corps service uniform, hands clasped behind me out of habit, trying to look as unobtrusive as a Marine could look among a room full of grieving officers and impatient relatives. But suddenly every gaze locked on me. Then the lawyer looked straight at me, not past me, not near me, but at me, and asked, "Sergeant Carter, do you know who your biological parents are?" It was such an absurd question that for a second I honestly thought he was asking someone behind me. My throat tightened, and the ground seemed to shift slow and seismic like a tremor starting deep beneath polished hardwood floors. I opened my mouth to respond, but no sound came out. I had come to the will reading out of respect. Nothing more. I didn't expect anything except maybe a brief mention in the section thanking the medical personnel who had assisted the general during his final illness. I certainly didn't expect whatever this was. I was no one important. I was just a Marine who happened to be assigned to him in his last months. I closed my eyes for a moment, steadying my breath, and the question clawed its way through old memories. I kept buried memories of a childhood with gaps, where explanations should have been memories of a mother who always dodged my questions about where I came from. Memories of a father who was never there at all. But before I could even form a reply, the lawyer had already turned back to the paper, waiting. The room had become a pressure chamber, squeezing every thought out of my head except for one. What did he just say? I forced myself to stand straighter to hide the tremor I felt inside. Marines don't flinch, especially not in front of a crowd, but inside something was cracking open. Until that moment, the morning had been painfully normal. I had driven to the law office in my beat-up blue pickup truck, the same one I'd owned since Camp Pendleton, and parked between a spotless black SUV and a Lexus that probably cost more than my entire life's savings. I wasn't sure I belonged there, but General Walker's lawyer had insisted I attend. He requested your presence personally, he'd said. I assumed it was a formality. Inside the building, I'd ridden the elevator with a cluster of officers in their dress uniforms. Most of them had known the general for decades. I was an outsider, a younger Marine who had only crossed paths with him in the final chapter of his life. They nodded politely, but their eyes said the truth. Why are you here? When the elevator doors opened, I followed them into the large conference room. At the center sat a polished mahogany table, large enough to host a diplomatic summit. Framed photographs lined the walls, the general shaking hands with presidents, hosting international delegations, awarding medals to service members. I took a seat near the back, choosing the same instinctive position I always chose, somewhere I could observe without being observed. Then came the family, nephews, cousins, people who looked related only by their matching expressions of annoyance and entitlement. They filled the room with loud greetings and impatient sighs. It was obvious they weren't there to mourn. They were there to collect. When the lawyer finally arrived carrying a thick binder and wearing an expression of professional neutrality, the room fell into a restless quiet. He began reading through the will's small bequests to charities, to former staff, to older friends from the general's long military career. I listened respectfully, expecting nothing, wanting nothing. I was simply fulfilling what I believed might be my last duty to the man I had taken care of. But then the lawyer turned to the final section of the will. And everything changed. As the weight of his question settled into the room, I felt something I hadn't felt since my first deployment overseas. A quiet, creeping fear, the kind that rises not from danger, but from truth. Did I know who my biological parents were? Yes and no. I knew my mother. I knew the tired eyes she tried to hide behind cheap drugstore mascara, the way she rubbed circles on my back when nightmares came, the way she worked double shifts at a grocery store so I could have a shot at college. But she never told me about my father. She never told me why she avoided certain questions. She never told me why my birth certificate looked incomplete. And I never pushed her harder than she allowed. She was all I had. When she died, the questions died with her. Or so I thought. Now, in a room filled with strangers, military brass in spotless uniforms, Anderson County's wealthiest social climbers and family members who looked ready to tear each other apart over whatever crumbs the general had left. I stood frozen, unsure if the ground beneath my boots was still the same ground I'd known a moment ago. It felt like the universe had cracked open to reveal a truth I wasn't ready to see. And yet, there it was. Waiting. Demanding. The lawyer cleared his throat gently, trying to nudge me toward a response. But all I could whisper was a single word barely audible even to myself: no. I didn't answer the lawyer right away. The words biological parents echoed in my head like somebody had dropped a pan in a quiet hospital corridor. Every eye was still on me, waiting, weighing, judging. My face grew hot the way it always did when a question cut too close to something I'd spent a lifetime avoiding. Did I know who my biological parents were? I took a breath that didn't feel like it reached my lungs. No, I said, finally, my voice barely more than a whisper. I don't. Not really. A murmur rippled through the room. One of the general's nephews, a heavy-set man in a tailored suit, let out a loud, disgusted snort. Then what on earth is she doing here? He snapped. She was just the nurse. This is ridiculous. Just the nurse. I'd heard that phrase in a lot of forms over the years. Just the nurse. Just the help. Just the person changing dressings at 2 a.m. while everyone else slept. I let the words slide over me the way I'd learned to do on long shifts with difficult families and arrogant patients. But inside something clenched tight. The lawyer, Mr. Daniels, lifted a hand. We'll get to that, he said firmly. Miss Carter, if you'll stay until we finish, I'll explain everything I can once the formal reading is done. General Walker was very specific about you being here. Very specific. The phrase sat wrong in my stomach. I sank back into my chair and my mind did what it always did when someone mentioned my real family. It went backward. I grew up in a narrow second-floor apartment above a laundromat in a part of town most people drove through without seeing. The building shook when trucks rumbled past. But to me it was home because Mom was there. She worked days at a grocery store and nights cleaning offices. She came home smelling like floor cleaner and dish soap, kicked off her shoes with a groan, and still managed to smile for me. On good nights, she'd heat up a frozen pizza, and we'd eat it off paper plates in front of an old TV. Just us girls, she'd say, tapping her soda can against mine. We're doing all right, kiddo. There was never a father in that picture. No extra chair at the table, no deep voice in the hallway, no weekend visits or birthday calls. When I was little and asked, she always gave the same answer. He wasn't ready to be a parent, she'd say, her expression closing down. But we're fine. We have each other. That's enough. One rainy afternoon when I was about 9, I went hunting for coloring books in her closet and found a cardboard box instead. Inside were a few faded photographs, some yellowed envelopes, and a hospital bracelet with tiny black letters. Not Carter. Harris. When Mom walked in and saw me holding the bracelet, the color drained from her face. Where did you get that? She asked, sharper than I'd ever heard her. In your closet, I said. Is this mine? Why does it say Harris? She crossed the room in 3 quick steps and gently but firmly took it from my hand. For a moment she just stared at it, her mouth pressed into a thin line. That's just an old mistake, she said finally. Paperwork. It doesn't matter. But why? She shoved the box back into the closet and closed the door. Then she knelt in front of me so we were eye to eye. Madison, listen to me, she said quietly. You are my daughter. I am your mother. That's what matters. Some things in the past don't help us. They just hurt. Do you understand? I didn't, not really. But I nodded because I could see how scared she was, and I loved her more than I loved any answer. After that, I stopped asking direct questions. The curiosity never went away, it just moved underground. I noticed the way she flinched at thick envelopes in the mail, the way she tore some letters in half without opening them, the way she changed the subject whenever grandparents or cousins came up in other people's stories. We never visited extended family for holidays. There were no old family photographs on the walls, no stories about when I was your age from anyone but her. It was just us, an island of 2. Years later, sitting in that polished conference room with the general's relatives muttering around me, I could almost smell the old apartment again, laundry soap, cheap coffee, her drugstore perfume. I could feel the smooth plastic of that hospital bracelet in my hand. After Mom died far too young, her lungs finally giving out after years of cleaning chemicals and secondhand smoke, I went through her things again looking for that box. It was gone. So were the papers and photographs. All she left behind was a note tucked into her worn Bible. "Forgive yourself, forgive me, keep going." At the time I assumed she meant the ordinary grief, forgive myself for not saving her, forgive her for leaving me alone. But with Mr. Daniels asking about my biological parents and an entire room full of strangers staring at me, the words felt heavier, like they belonged to a secret I still didn't know. What exactly had she done that needed that kind of forgiveness? "Miss Carter." Mr. Daniels's voice pulled me back to the present. The reading was over. People were standing chairs, scraping voices sharp with outrage. I realized I hadn't heard a single word of the last several pages. I got to my feet automatically, yes. "If you'll stay for a few minutes," he said, lowering his voice so only I could hear, "I'll explain why General Walker wanted you here. There are documents you need to see." My heart started pounding again. I looked around the room at the angry faces, the relatives who had clearly expected a very different ending than the one they'd just heard, and I understood something simple and terrifying. Whatever this is, I thought my life is not going back to normal after today. Mr. Daniels guided me out of the conference room and into a quiet hallway with framed photographs of judges, officers, and retired attorneys. The carpet muffled our footsteps, and the moment the door closed behind us, the angry chatter of the general's relatives became a distant buzzing irritation like wasps trapped behind glass. He motioned toward a smaller consultation room. "Let's sit," he said. "This may take a moment." My pulse hammered in my ears. I sat stiffly in a leather chair that squeaked under my weight, hands folded in my lap like I was back in nursing school waiting for an instructor to hand down a grade. Mr. Daniels took the seat across from me and opened a thin manila file. "Sergeant Carter," he began gently, "I realize you're confused. To be honest, when the general first shared his suspicions with me, I was skeptical too. But as his health declined, he became certain. Certain of what I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He met my eyes, that you were connected to him." I blinked. Connected how? Instead of answering, he slid a small stack of documents toward me. The top one was a copy of my birth certificate, or rather, the stripped-down version I'd always known. The one with missing fields. The one Mom always dismissed as just a paperwork mix-up. Below it was a handwritten note in the general's bold, slanted script. "Find her. Confirm." My stomach tightened. Why would he have this? Mr. Daniels folded his hands. "Because he asked for it. Through legal channels. He knew you'd been adopted, and he knew your mother had used 2 different last names in the years following your birth." I felt the blood drain from my face. How would he know that? "Because your mother served on a military base," he commanded, he said quietly. "She was a civilian nurse there, 31 years ago." My breath caught. I swallowed hard. My mother never mentioned that. "General Walker remembered her," he said, "very clearly." I leaned back trying to make sense of it, but why? He reached for another document, a faded personnel photo clipped to a form. A younger version of my mother stared back at me wearing a simple blouse, hair pulled back, eyes full of uncertainty. And something else. Fear, hope, I couldn't tell. I traced her face with my thumb. "She looks like me," I whispered. Mr. Daniels nodded. "General Walker requested every file he could legally obtain. When he saw your picture in the hospital directory, he said it felt like déjà vu." I closed my eyes. I could almost hear Mom's voice again, tight and trembling. "Some things in the past don't help us. They just hurt." "What did he tell you?" I managed. "That he'd known your mother," he said, "and that she left the base abruptly without explanation. He tried to find her, but her trail went cold within months. He always regretted it." My throat tightened. Why regret it? Who was she to him? He hesitated just a moment, but long enough for dread to crawl up my spine. "Mr. Daniels," I said, my voice cracking slightly, "please, I need the truth." He exhaled. He believed she was his niece, his sister's daughter. The world tilted. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. "That would make—" "Yes," he nodded slowly. "He believed you were his granddaughter." I shook my head as if denial could change reality. My mom never said anything. She said she didn't have family. It's complicated, he said softly. Family histories often are. He reached into the folder again and removed a small brass key. Before he passed, the general asked me to give you this. It unlocks a storage trunk in his home, something he kept for decades. What's inside? He gave me a sad smile. I don't know. He said you'd understand when the time came. I held the key in my palm. It felt strangely warm, like it had been waiting for me. I don't understand, I whispered. Why didn't he reach out sooner if he thought I was family? Why didn't he say anything? Mr. Daniels folded the manila folder gently, as if sealing something delicate inside. He didn't want to burden you without proof. He knew the risks of being wrong, especially given the contentious nature of his relatives. I nodded slowly, remembering the furious faces in the conference room. If they were this hostile to me as a nurse, I could only imagine their reaction if he'd claimed me as kin while he was alive. He continued. He also knew your mother left for a reason. He didn't want to disrupt the life she built. But when he learned you were caring for him, when he saw your compassion, your patience, he told me he felt like he'd been given a second chance to do something right. Tears stung my eyes. I blinked them away. He didn't treat me like family. He treated me like a nurse doing her job. That was intentional, Mr. Daniels said. He wanted to see who you were when you thought no one was watching. Not as an heir, not as a walker, just as yourself. I sank deeper into the chair, absorbing the weight of it all. So what now? I asked. That's up to you, he said. But I will tell you this, there are still documents you haven't seen. Records, notes he kept. And that key, it opens more than a trunk. It opens answers. For a long moment I stared at the little brass key. I thought about my mother's secrecy, my childhood questions, the missing pieces that never fit. And then I thought about the General Stern, demanding gruff, yet unexpectedly gentle in his final days when he thought no one noticed. All those times he held my hand during painful treatments, all the conversations where he seemed to watch my face too closely as if searching for something. Maybe he had been. I closed my fingers tightly around the key. I want to see his house, I said. I want to open that trunk. Mr. Daniels nodded. I'll arrange it. As I walked out of the office and into the afternoon light, the air felt colder than it should have. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just carrying questions. I was carrying the possibility of answers. And somehow that was even more terrifying. The General's house sat on the edge of town, half hidden behind towering oak trees that spread their branches like watchful arms. It was the kind of place you didn't approach casually. 3 stories of stone and wood-wide porches, manicured hedges and flags that still hung at half-mast. Mrs. Avery, his housekeeper of nearly 30 years, opened the door before I knocked twice. She looked at me with a mixture of recognition and something softer, pity maybe, or concern. You came, she said gently. He hoped you would. She stepped aside, letting me into the foyer. The air smelled faintly of furniture polish and something older, like books and secrets. I'm supposed to find a trunk, I said quietly. Something he left for me. Her expression tightened, but she nodded. It's upstairs. He kept it in the room he called the memory study. Come this way. She led me through hallways lined with photographs, General Walker in his uniform, shaking hands with commanders seated beside presidents and foreign leaders. But mixed in were more personal images, summer picnics, holiday gatherings, a younger version of Mrs. Avery laughing in a crowded kitchen. But I noticed something else. There were no pictures of his sister, none of Willow, none of my mother's branch of the family. When we reached the 2nd floor, Mrs. Avery paused outside a closed door. He spent a lot of time in here at the end, she said. Some days, he just sat for hours thinking. She opened the door and let me inside. The room was small and dim-lit, mostly by a single window. A writing desk stood near the wall, its surface neat except for a stack of envelopes bound with twine. A bookshelf held volumes of history, law, and military life. And beside the window sat a cedar trunk with a brass lock. I didn't have to ask. I knew instantly this was it. I held out the key Mr. Daniels had given me and knelt beside the trunk. My hands trembled as I slid the key into the lock. It clicked softly like a sigh. Inside, the cedar scent rose faintly familiar and foreign at the same time. The trunk was filled with papers, notebooks, and a thick binder labeled W. Spears Family. My breath caught. Spears, the general's last name, my grandmother's maiden name. I lifted the binder first. Inside were neatly organized files, photographs, letters, and official paperwork. The earliest documents belonged to a woman named Willow Spears, a teenage girl with a shy smile and long dark hair. My grandmother. There were pictures of her as a child laughing beside a much younger Raymond Walker. One photo stopped me cold, the two of them sitting on a porch swing, arms looped around each other, big goofy grins on their faces. On the back, written in faded ink, Ray and Willow summer before deployment. My fingers shook as I turned the page. The next file was labeled Elizabeth, my mother. I had never seen these photographs before. My mother as a baby, as a toddler then, as a teenager. Her eyes were the same shade as mine. In every picture, she stood close to Willow, almost clinging to her. The next pages were letters, folders full of them, written by my grandmother to the general. Letters he had kept for decades. I lifted one carefully. The handwriting was elegant and tired. Raymond. Your brother came again. He said terrible things, said he would take Elizabeth away, said she belongs with the real family. I won't let him. We are leaving soon. I don't know where yet. I just know we have to go. A chill crawled up my spine. The general's brother. The same one who'd snarled at me in the conference room. I opened another letter. I'm sorry for leaving without saying goodbye. But you know your brother. He will not stop. Please don't look for us. It's safer this way. Safer. My mother had fled because she was afraid of being found, of losing her own child, of a family dispute twisting into something cruel. Another letter dated months later revealed even more. I have changed our names. We are starting over. I know you'll be angry, but I can't risk her. I can't risk Elizabeth. My chest tightened. Elizabeth. That was my original name before Mom renamed me Madison Carter. But then I reached the final envelope in the stack, the one with tear stains darkening the paper. Raymond. She's pregnant. She's scared. And she refuses to let you help. I begged her to return home, but she won't. She believes your brother will try to claim the baby. She won't say it, but I know she's thinking of disappearing again. She's thinking of running, of raising the child alone. I don't know what to do. I stared at the date. It was a month before I was born. My vision blurred. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. Mom had run again, this time to escape both men, the one who might have helped her and the one who would have tried to control her. Mrs. Avery spoke softly behind me. He loved your grandmother, you know. She raised him after their parents died. Losing her broke something in him. I swallowed hard. Why didn't he tell me any of this? He wanted to, she said. But when he saw you walk into his room for the first time, he wasn't sure. Not until he saw how much you looked like Willow. And not until he watched you care for him with the same gentleness your grandmother had. I closed the binder and reached deeper into the trunk. Underneath the papers lay one more item, a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate gold necklace with a tiny engraved pendant shaped like a leaf. On the back was a single word, Elizabeth. My mother's first name, my name. A sob rose in my throat. I pressed the pendant against my chest, unable to stop the tears that finally spilled over. I had spent my life feeling like a question mark, like a blank space in my own story. But the truth was here in this trunk, messy, painful, buried, but real. My mother hadn't abandoned me. She had protected me. She had run, not because she didn't love me, but because she loved me too much to risk losing me to people who saw heirs instead of children. I felt Mrs. Avery's hand settle gently on my shoulder. He wanted you to know the truth, she said. All of it, even the parts that hurt. I don't know what to do with this, I whispered. You start by breathing, she said. Then you keep going, just like your mother wanted. I closed the trunk slowly, the pendant still warm in my hand. For the first time in my life, I wasn't angry at my mother. I understood her, and that hurt more than anything else. By the time I left the general's house with the pendant around my neck and the binder tucked under my arm, the late afternoon sky had begun to dim. Clouds smeared the horizon in long gray strokes, and a chill crept over the air like the beginning of a storm. I sat in my car for several minutes before starting the engine, too overwhelmed to move. Everything I had ever known about my life, my childhood, my mother, my identity was shifting beneath me like plates under the earth. The truth wasn't a neat revelation. It was jagged, complicated, painful. Still, one thing was clear: the general's relatives had lied, they had interfered, and they had tried to erase me. I drove to Mr. Daniels's office because he had asked me to return. The last of the relatives were still gathered inside when I walked through the door, their voices rising and falling in harsh waves. As soon as they saw me, the shouting sharpened. "There she is," one of the nephews barked, jabbing a finger toward me. He was tall, red-faced, and looked like he hadn't missed a meal in decades. "The little gold-digger nurse, you manipulated him. You tricked a dying old man." I didn't flinch. I'd been insulted before by patients in pain families and grief, and strangers who thought nurses were servants. But never like this. Never by people who had tried so hard to keep me from knowing who I was. Mr. Daniels stepped between us, calm but firm. "Enough. Miss Carter is here because she is legally entitled to be. And because the general made it so." He was confused, the nephew shot back. He was medicated, weak and alone, and she took advantage of it. If he only knew how many times the general had tried to refuse his pain medication, how proud he'd been, how stubborn, how desperate to stay alert for unfinished business. She was his nurse, another relative snarled. Not family, not blood. That word blood landed like a blow. They had used that same word years ago in the letters. They wanted to claim me because of my blood. Or erase me because of it. Mr. Daniels lifted a hand, tired patience in his eyes. "I have documentation," he said. "All of you will have your chance to see it. But first, Miss Carter needs to speak." I didn't expect to. But when he turned to me, waiting, something inside me steadied. I set the binder on the table and opened it to the first photograph of my grandmother and the general. The room fell quiet. That photograph, two teenagers laughing together, did more to silence them than any argument could. "This is Willow Spears," I said. "Your aunt, your mother, your sister." And this, I tapped the picture. This was her family. All of it, including him. The nephew scoffed. "So what? That proves nothing." I turned the page. Letters spilled across the table, pleas for help, warnings, confessions written in a mother's fearful hand. I read aloud the parts that mattered. He said he would take Elizabeth away. "We have to leave. It isn't safe. I've changed our names. Please don't look for us." "That's my mother," I said, my voice shaking but strong. "Running because she was afraid of you. Afraid of what you'd do if you found her baby." Several faces paled. One woman began to tremble, her lips parted in disbelief. The nephew opened his mouth to argue, but no sound came out. Then I turned to the last envelope, the one with tear stains. "My mother didn't run because she hated this family," I said, meeting their eyes one by one. "She ran because she loved me. Because she thought someone here would try to claim me like a prize, or use me to manipulate the general. She didn't want that life for me." The nephew regained his voice. "This is ridiculous," he spat. "You expect us to believe some fairy tale anyone could have written those letters." Without a word, I pulled out the pendant. The room gasped softly. "This was my mother's," I said. "Her birth name, Elizabeth, engraved on the back. He kept it for 30 years, waiting for her, waiting for me." Mr. Daniels placed a hand on the binder. "And if you require proof, we have more. The DNA test the general ordered months ago. A match he never wanted to reveal without certainty." The nephew's face twisted. "You're lying." "No," Mr. Daniels said calmly. "You are." He turned to me. "The floor is yours, Miss Carter." I took a breath. A long, steadying breath. And for the first time I understood what kind of revenge I wanted, not the explosive kind, not the destructive kind. Something more painful. Truth. Truth delivered in the calmest tone possible. "I'm not here to fight you," I said quietly. "I'm not here to take anything from you." Some looked skeptical. "What I am here to do," I continued, "is to tell you that your uncle spent years trying to find the people he loved. And you, all of you, made that impossible. You stood in his way. You lied to him. You let him die thinking he'd failed his family when the truth was you failed him. No one spoke. You called me just a nurse. But I cared for him. I listened to him. I held his hand when he was afraid. I heard him talk about the people he'd lost and the mistakes he regretted. And not once did any of you show up to do the same." The tension in the room cracked like ice. If you want revenge, I said softly, then here it is you'll live knowing that the man you ignored loved me, and that the kindness you treated like weakness was the only wisdom he trusted in the end. The nephew stepped back, his fists clenched, but he had no words. No one did. Finally, the older woman, one of the cousins, sat heavily in a chair, tears running down her face. "He really loved you," she whispered, "didn't he?" I nodded. In his own complicated way, yes. And I loved him too. The room fell silent again, this time without anger. Just truth, and grief, and maybe in some of them shame. Mr. Daniels cleared his throat. Legally, he said, Miss Carter is the rightful heir. There will be no successful contest. The general left behind detailed records documenting his decision. One by one, the relatives left, some muttering, some crying, some too stunned to speak. When the last door closed, I finally sank into a chair. Exhausted, numb, but strangely free. I didn't raise my voice once. I didn't throw accusations. My revenge had been letting the truth speak louder than their greed. And it had worked. When the last relative stormed out and the office door clicked shut, the silence felt almost unreal. Moments earlier, the room had been a boiling pot, accusations, shouting threats, all of it swirling around me like a tornado. Now, only the hum of the fluorescent lights broke the stillness. Mr. Daniels took a seat across from me. His shoulders slumped with the exhaustion of a man who'd spent weeks preparing for this exact battle. He rubbed his temples with slow, small circles, then looked up at me with something resembling relief. "You handled that with more grace than anyone I've ever seen," he said. "I don't feel graceful," I admitted. "I feel hollow." "That's normal," he replied softly. "Truth shakes us before it settles." He reached for a navy blue envelope, thick and sealed with wax. My name, my full legal name, was written in the general's firm handwriting, to Madison Elizabeth. Seeing both names together, the one my mother chose and the one she hid, triggered a rush of emotion so sharp it nearly stole my breath. Mr. Daniels slid the envelope toward me. This was his last request. He wrote it 3 days before he passed. My fingers shook as I broke the seal. The scent of cedar and the faintest hint of the general's cologne rose from the folded pages. For a moment, I couldn't bring myself to open it. I wasn't ready. But then I remembered the binder, the trunk, the pendant. All the truth I had asked for, or maybe needed, was already changing me. I unfolded the letter. The handwriting wavered, betraying the weakness of his last days, but the words were steady, honest, unmistakably him. My dearest Elizabeth, I know you prefer Madison, and that is the name I came to love. But you were born Elizabeth, and I need you to know what that name means. It was your grandmother's pride and your mother's first gift to you. I hope someday you can wear it without pain. I pressed my palm against my mouth, willing myself not to cry too soon. If you are reading this, it means the truth has found you, and I hope with all my heart that it finds you gently. But if it doesn't, then take comfort in this. None of what happened was your fault. And none of it was your mother's fault either. That line broke me, quietly. Your grandmother and I were stubborn people. We let one argument become a canyon between us. She felt I was losing myself to money and status. I believed she was throwing away her future by running from our family. We were both wrong. Pride cost us decades. It cost me the chance to watch you grow. My eyes blurred. I blinked until the words steadied again. When the nurse agency sent your photograph before your interview, I felt something I had not felt in years. Hope. You had your grandmother's eyes, her quiet courage, her steadiness. I asked around, quietly. I walked carefully, so carefully, because I didn't want to damage whatever life your mother had built for you. She did what she had to do. I understand that now. My tears fell freely then, not hard sobs, just steady drops, grief and sorrow and love all tangled together. You cared for me even when I was difficult, even when I pushed too hard. You sat with me on the bad days and laughed with me on the good ones. You saw me as more than a man with money. You reminded me who I used to be. If I could stand again, I would kneel to thank you for giving an old man something he had surrendered long ago, a sense of worth. I paused to breathe. The room felt smaller, warmer, like he was still there somehow. As for what I have left you, it is not intended as a reward. It is not meant to change who you are. It is meant to protect the goodness in you. It is meant to give your dreams a fighting chance. I know about your plans for a clinic. I know how deeply you care for those who have nothing. Your mother would be proud, Willow would be proud, and I am proud. More than words can say. My heart clenched. I had never expected pride or belonging from anyone beyond my mother. To hear it from him, even in writing, felt like a piece of me I didn't know was missing finally slipped into place. One last request, my dear. Do not let my family's actions shape your future. Do not let their bitterness harden you. They have lived their lives chasing money. Live yours, chasing meaning. That is the real inheritance. I brushed a tear from the corner of the page. Whatever name you choose, Madison or Elizabeth, carry it with honor. Carry it with kindness. You are the bridge between what our family was and what it could have been. You are my legacy. With all my love, your Uncle Raymond. I lowered the letter slowly, staring at the curling edges as though they might move. Mr. Daniels waited quietly, giving me space to absorb each word. It took several minutes before I could speak. He cared about me, more than I realized. He did, Mr. Daniels said, and he trusted you, completely. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. Where do I even begin, I asked. With a choice, he said. What do you want to do with the estate? The question should have overwhelmed me. $12 million. Property, investments, a mansion. The weight of it pressed against my chest. But then I thought of the general's final request. Don't let bitterness harden you. Live for meaning, not money. Give your dreams a fighting chance. I thought of my mother working herself to the bone. I thought of patients who had no coverage. Children whose only doctor visits were through emergency rooms. The underserved neighborhoods I'd always dreamed of helping. I know what he would have wanted, I said softly. I think I know exactly what to do. Mr. Daniels nodded as if he'd been waiting for those words. Then let's begin. As I left the office, the first drops of rain began to fall, slow, cold silver streaks on the sidewalk. I tilted my head up and let the rain touch my face. For the first time, the past didn't feel like a wound. It felt like a map. The rain didn't let up for days after the will reading, as if the sky itself needed time to settle everything that had been unearthed. I spent those quiet gray mornings sitting at my small kitchen table, the general's letter resting beside a cup of coffee that always went cold before I remembered to drink it. Every sentence replayed in my head, you are my legacy. Live for meaning, not money. Give your dreams a fighting chance. For years, I'd carried those dreams in silence, folded away like an old note in a pocket I never opened. A free clinic for families who couldn't afford care. A safe place for seniors who didn't want to be a burden. A community hub where health and dignity were treated as birthrights, not luxuries. But dreams cost money I'd never had, not until now. Within a week, I'd walked the abandoned mansion again, this time with a notebook tape measure and a quiet determination that surprised even me. The house felt different now, not grand, not intimidating, just full of possibility. Mrs. Avery wandered in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. It's a beautiful home, she said. Grand in its own way. I used to think it needed a family again. It does, I replied, just not the kind everyone expected. She smiled softly. Then let's get to work. The renovation took months-long, exhausting months filled with dust permits, contractors, budget meetings, and decisions I'd never imagined needing to make. There were nights I fell asleep on drop cloths, mornings when I doubted everything, fearing I was destroying something the general had cherished. But then I would reread his letter, and the fear would pass. We tore out the antique dining room and built a waiting area. The parlor became an exam room. The ballroom became a physical therapy center. The library, the room he spent countless hours in, became my office. I kept one thing exactly as it was, his desk by the window, the perfect spot to watch the world change. We called it the Raymond Walker Community Health Center. When the doors finally opened, the first patient to walk in was a tired mother with two small children clinging to her legs. One had a cough so deep it made my heart ache. The mother apologized again and again for not being able to afford a doctor sooner. I knelt, checked the child's pulse, listened to his lungs, and smiled reassuringly. You're here now, I said. You're exactly where you need to be. Word spread quickly. Seniors came from across town for free checkups. Veterans walked in shoulders stiff with pride, admitting quietly that they needed help. Families arrived in clusters, shy at first, then grateful. Each day as I walked the halls of what used to be the general's mansion, I felt something healing inside me. Something old, something tender. Something that had been waiting for permission to breathe. One quiet afternoon, as the center buzzed with activity, I stood in my office staring at the pendant lying on my desk. The word Elizabeth glimmered softly in the sunlight. I still wasn't used to hearing it or thinking of myself as a woman with two names, two histories, two families. A knock on the door broke my thoughts. Mrs. Avery peeked in. "There's someone here asking for you," she said gently. "You might want to speak with him." I walked into the foyer and froze. It was the general's nephew, the loudest, angriest one from the will reading. His shoulders were slumped now, and he held his hat nervously in his hands like a schoolboy waiting outside a principal's office. I hope this is okay," he said awkwardly. "I heard what you did with the house. I wanted to see." I crossed my arms but didn't speak. He cleared his throat. "Look, I was awful to you. We all were. I grew up hearing the story one way, that your grandmother abandoned the family, that your mother was ungrateful, that you didn't exist. When Uncle Ray changed the will, I felt cheated. But I was wrong." Silence pressed between us. He looked around, taking in the clinic, the patients, the volunteers. His expression softened. This place, it's something he would have loved, more than the money, more than anything. I swallowed the knot in my throat. He wanted to help people. He just didn't know how anymore. The nephew nodded. "Thank you for giving him back some dignity at the end." It was the closest thing to an apology I would ever get, but it was enough. "Would you like a tour?" I asked quietly. He smiled, small, hesitant, grateful. "Yeah, I'd like that." We walked together through the center, and for the first time I didn't see him as the man who tried to shout me out of a will. I saw him as a broken piece of the same shattered family I came from, someone who needed healing just as much as I did. Reconciliation isn't always grand or loud. Sometimes it's a quiet walk through a place built from pain and love in equal measure. Months later, on a warm spring evening, I locked up the clinic and stepped outside. The sky blazed with oranges and pinks, and the scent of fresh grass drifted across the yard. I found myself walking toward the garden where the general used to sit during his good days. I imagined him there now, leaning back, arms crossed, trying not to show how pleased he was. "I hope I'm doing right by you," I whispered to the empty air. "I hope Mom sees it too." A soft breeze rustled the trees, carrying the faint scent of cedar. I pressed the pendant to my heart. For the first time in my life, I felt whole. Not because of the inheritance, not because of the clinic, but because I had finally learned where I came from and who I wanted to be moving forward. Family wasn't blood or money or names on a birth certificate. Family was kindness offered freely, compassion given without expectation, legacy built with love, not wealth. As I walked back toward the clinic, lights glowing softly through its windows, I realized something simple and profound. My revenge had never been about hurting anyone. It was about proving that goodness survives even when everything tries to bury it. And that, I knew, was the kind of inheritance worth passing on. Before you go, I'd love to hear something from you. Have you ever experienced a family mystery, a hidden story, or a moment that changed the way you saw your past? Share it in the comments if you feel comfortable someone out there might need to hear it. And if this story touched your heart, stay with us for more stories that remind us what really matters: compassion, connection, and the courage to become who we're meant to be.